Hi and welcome. My name is Jody Rujorin. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Forward. We're very excited to have you with us. And as people are coming in, we're going to actually start off with a little bit of music by Rabbi Sandra.
Hey, just so a little context, we are in the sea and we're free. Um, we are walking in the light of God. 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 Mi chamocha be'elim Adonai. Mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nora tehilot. Osefele. We are walking, we are walking, we are walking in the light of God. We are walking in the light of God. We are walking in the light of God. Michamocha be'elim Adonai. Michamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nora tehilot. Osei fele. Walking in the light of God. Song led by Miriam as we made our way to freedom.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sandra. And you said that we're reading the parsha with that in it this week. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, we are in the Torah portion that contains the Song of the Sea as the Israelites get to the sea and they realize that they are kind of stuck. And there's so much coolness in this week's Torah portion. You can even add the song "Wade in the Water," which I sometimes like to do with this week's Torah portion.
Great. Well, thank you for starting us off on that beautiful note. Again, for those who are just joining us, I'm Jody Redoran. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Forward, and we have two rabbis with us today, Dan Fink and Sandra Lawson, two members of our Forward 50. This is part of a series of conversations we're doing in the early part of the year with different members of our Forward 50, just bringing them together. We actually matched them up kind of randomly. We just said, what day is good for you? And figured that we'll see where the conversations take us. We end up with two rabbis here today who are similar and different in such interesting ways. I'm really excited to see how they've never met before, and it'll be really interesting to see them in conversation with each other as well as with you. You are welcome to use the chat as you already have started. I'm echoing, I hear. I'm echoing. Let me see if I can do anything about my echoing. I'll work on it, but I'm going to start by just introducing them a little bit. You are welcome to use the chat as you've already been doing to comment on anything you hear, to share any links that are relevant, or to tell me that I'm echoing. And you also can use the Q&A button to pose any questions, to raise any questions that you'd like me to pose to the rabbis for them to answer, or for me to answer if you want. I'll anticipate one of your questions, which is this being recorded? Yes, it's also being broadcast live on our Facebook page, and you will receive a copy of the video in your email tomorrow, along with notices for upcoming events and any other notes from the conversation that are relevant. So we'd love you to share it with your friends and followers on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or wherever you have followers, and encourage people to join us for future conversations. I'll give just a quick intro to my guests and then we'll get right into it. Rabbi Sandra Lawson has been a rabbi for 2 years, since June of 2018. She got her ordination from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. She is many, many things. She's a military veteran. She's a personal trainer. She's a vegan. She's a musician, as you already heard. She has been an associate chaplain for the last couple of years for Jewish Life at the Hillel at Elon University in North Carolina. And she just took a new job that will be starting in March as the inaugural director of racial diversity, equity, inclusion for Reconstructing Judaism. And I'm thrilled to have her back. She was on a Zoom with me around Juneteenth. She's written for the Forward, and she's also a very prominent rabbi on TikTok and on Twitter, where she answers all manner of questions. And I just love talking to her. Rabbi Dan Fink is someone I'm just getting to know too. He's been the rabbi at Congregation Ahavat Beth Yisrael for more than 26 years. That is the congregation that I'm sure all of you have been to in Boise, Idaho. It is the, if I get this right, they are the oldest continuing congregation in the same building west of the Mississippi. I think that's right, Dan? Thank you. And one of the reasons we put him on the Forward 50 is he, you know, like every congregational pulpit rabbi dealt with so many challenges around the coronavirus pandemic. And he was doing all sorts of creative things with his congregation around that. When then in the fall, there was a swastika vandalism attack on the Anne Frank Memorial in his community. And he became a really important voice in responding to that. It's also Beshert and Kismet that Rabbi Dan has been really engaged with environmental activism. And we are meeting today during International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which we'll get back to in a minute, but also on the eve of Tu B'Shvat. And Dan, like Sandra, is also a musician. He's also a big outdoorsman, kayaking, canoeing, other things like that. So he's gonna have a song for us also at the end. So I would love to, maybe I'm gonna just ask you, Dan, to start, and then Sandra to pick up, to just talk to us a little bit about, I don't know, tell us a little bit about your 2020, your experience through the last year, and those incidents, those things I mentioned, but also if you want to relate it at all to this week's portion or Torah generally or the calendar. We always love to have rabbis teach us a little bit on these conversations.
So maybe I'll relate it calendar-wise to Tu B'Shvat. I mean, like my colleagues everywhere, and like people everywhere, you know, it's been a challenging year. Lots of learning curve, figuring out how to do things in new ways, how to try to create and sustain community when we're not able to be physically together. And you know, we've been kind of learning as we go. It's been tough, and it's also been enlightening in certain ways. And you know, I think, as everyone says, there'll be things we take away with us, you know, long after the pandemic is over. The connection to the season. So tonight we begin Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is one of 4 New Years that the Talmud speaks about, right? So, you know, in addition to Rosh Hashanah, the new year by the calendar, we have a series of New Years. And I remind people for whom this seems strange, in American culture too, we have New Years, right? We have fiscal years and tax years and beginning of the football season years. So Tu B'Shvat is the new year for trees. And originally it has to do with when you're taxed on produce from trees. But what I like about this new year for trees is that it doesn't happen when the trees are yielding their fruit. It doesn't even happen when the trees, for the most part, are blossoming everywhere. Tu B'Shvat is when the sap begins to run in the trees, which is to say, it's when spring is actually beginning, but it's beginning hidden. It's happening in the roots that are doing the work underground. It's happening in the sap running through the trunk. And that, I think, feels very much to me like where we are, at least where I am right now, which is, you know, we have beginnings of hope. We have a new administration. We have vaccines, but we're not in spring yet, and we have a long way to go. But this holiday, which reminds us that even when it still looks like winter out there, that spring is quietly happening, is inspiring for me.
Rabbi Sandra, you want to pick up on that at all? You're muted.
It would not be Zoom if I didn't have to remember to unmute myself. You know, I have always loved Tu B'Shvat because it is the I often see it as the New Year of trees, and the fact that we're gifted 4 New Years in our calendar. Just it's this another opportunity for renewal, recharging, and all that refreshing stuff. And then, if you live in an area that that is might be super cold or super dark, Tu B'Shvat is that sort of space where spring is coming, because maybe you see the hint of blooming. I live in North Carolina, where Dan's mom lives, and I saw that she's on the thing on the chat. Our winters here are mild, but I look forward to Tu B'Shvat because there's this opportunity for blooming, for a new start. And with 2020, which I think was I think it was your original question, or part of a question that you asked, was just challenging, awesome in its strange ways. And here we are, 2021, with a new president. I put on Twitter, it's so nice to listen to boring press conferences. I'm like, it's so excited. What are they saying? It's just, I can't believe that that's a thing. And another thing I posted on Twitter, because I share with you all, I contacted my doctor and I have an appointment to get a vaccine. Like that, who would have thought that I would be excited about that? If you asked me a few years ago. So, New Year trees, lots of newness, new blooming, new life, new everything.
I said the same thing, Sandra, last week. I was like, realized that the way I understood that we were in this new normal was the difference between being kind of cringing, afraid of what the president might say versus just worrying about the whole thing being boring. Yeah. Felt like a great return to normalcy for me. Yes. And then Joe Biden actually really surprised me with a not at all boring speech, although he did come back that night at the concert with a reprise that was less interesting. But while we're on the calendar, I do want to take a minute to start with about today is the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We published this morning a really important investigation that I'm posting in the chat, documenting all of the monuments to Nazi collaborators that still exist around the world. And we went after looking at this after so much talk last year about the problematic monuments in this country to Confederate leaders or slave owners or other racists. And so many interesting debates happened on campuses and other places about how do we acknowledge the past without honoring it. And then we discovered that there are literally hundreds of memorials to Nazi collaborators around this country and around the world. And I just want to ask each of you we have 4 New Years, we have 3 different Holocaust Remembrance Days, but I'm interested, it feels like maybe everything just feels so heightened in this time, in this moment after 2020, but here we are 2 weeks out from this, or maybe 3 now, from this insurrectionist riot that was underpinned by anti-Semitism, various comparisons, I think mostly problematic, to Kristallnacht in that event, and also last year around the Black Lives Matter protests. I just wonder how each of you are thinking about or talking about or marking the Holocaust Remembrance Day this year, and how it feels maybe different to you than prior years.
At first, I didn't know about this article, so I'm looking forward to reading it. And I also want to add just something that you said earlier. And I'm a student. I love history, but I love learning, and I'm a work in progress, like all of us. And so if I say something that's wrong, this is how I currently see it. And I was just thinking that, like, if you look at how Germany treated its war criminals, there are no monuments that I'm aware of that celebrate the Nazi regime or celebrate Nazism. In fact, it's the opposite. They have memorials that celebrate the victims. If you look at what the United States did after the Civil War, and then mostly it came up after Jim Crow, we have all these monuments that celebrate treason, that celebrate murder, and Jefferson Davis and General Lee, one of them, I can't remember which one, was pretty much given like a presidency in a university, and it just sort of like, we don't have this reconciliation that we desperately need. But to sort of shortly answer your question, because I want Dan to be able to speak, because I feel like I've taken up more time, that, I want us as a country to understand that what feeds anti-Semitism is the same thing that feeds racism. It's the same thing that feeds sexism. And when we see these things as all coming from the same root or whatever, white supremacy. And I also want to add that I believe that there's a difference between whiteness, white supremacy, and white people. Whiteness is something that has evolved and people have requested membership into and assimilated into. And instead of fighting with each other or competing with oppression Olympics, which I hear a lot, we need to be working together so that we can get rid of these ills that are hurting all of us. It does not help our country when we still have people suffering from inequity. And we live in a Christian-centric society that has told a particular version of Christianity that hurts the Jew, hurts us, and is anti-Semitic, and we need to stop doing that. We just need to work together to end all forms of inequality and all forms of racism, bias, and discrimination. I know that's a tall order, but I'm hopeful one day.
I mean, this is like a awkward, strange kind of silver lining comment, but I do think that one of the things that has happened in the latest conversations around white supremacy, anti-Semitism, disinformation, conspiracy theories is there is an elevation of the problem of anti-Semitism that I think, and its connection to the broader issue of white nationalism, white supremacy, that has been positive in the discourse in terms of the focus and the understanding of those connections that you're talking about.
My wife is going on a bike ride.
Pick up on any of that, or tell us a little bit about how Holocaust Remembrance Day is playing out for you and your community.
So I too will be interested to read the article you posted. I've spent a good bit of time in Lithuania. 4 years ago, one of my daughters and I, paddled close to 400 miles across the country. We paddled from east of Vilna to the Baltic Sea, because my family had come from there, and I liked the kayak, and I thought it would be an interesting way to see the country. But what you see there is that history is really complicated, and the challenge is that people who they see who liberated them from the Soviets were Nazi sympathizers, right? So there's so much that's mixed up in this history, and it's difficult and challenging and threatening to people. So we have to to have the courage to look honestly at our past and who we are is hard, and it's also essential. What feels different for me this year is that, I grew up knowing lots of Holocaust survivors. I mean, they were part of my congregation. They were part of my community. And in my boyhood, they were just, there were the people in the synagogue with the numbers on their arms. But it always felt to me like something that happened over there and could never happen here. It felt incredibly distant, and it was always, I studied history, I read it, but there was a part of me that could never grasp, like, how could human beings do this? Now, some of this I recognize, I think it was much easier to grasp for people of color. I was a white man, so I grew up in a pretty privileged place. But I think that what we're seeing now is the realization that, it wasn't something that happened somewhere else that is inconceivable to happen here. And again, it feels emotionally way closer to home than it ever has. And again, I think in some ways, this is a kind of reckoning that those of us who are white are coming to see how it's been for others in this country for a long time.
While we're on the Holocaust topic, can you give us an update of what happened with the vandalism at the Anne Frank Memorial? I don't know if people normally would go there on a day like today. Maybe they wouldn't now because of the pandemic. But was anybody caught? Was there any big reconciliation in the community after that initial kind of? I know the mayor had a press conference in the days afterwards.
Sure. So I guess maybe I should explain to people. There is an Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial in the center of the city. It's something that we're pretty proud of, and it's an important place here, a sacred place, I would say. Even it was really put there. The effort came when three women, two of whom are members of my congregation, Leslie Drake and Lisa Ullman, and one of whom was a pastor here at the Congregational Church, Reverend Nancy Taylor, who's now at their flagship place in Boston. They had the idea to create a memorial after our local historical museum hosted a traveling exhibit on Anne Frank. And they wanted it to be to honor the memory of Anne Frank, but also to be a human rights memorial for all people. And there was a wall of quotes from people from all over the world talking about oppression and the work for justice. And so it's a beautiful place, beautiful, aesthetically beautiful, but morally beautiful too. And it was hit with swastikas by vandals. This was the second time this had happened in a couple of years. And the response, I always think it's important to take note of this, of what happened, and to remember that these folks are out there. It's also important to note the response. What the folks put on with their swastikas was the words "We are everywhere" with swastikas. I went down to the memorial and actually did my Shabbat evening service from the memorial via Zoom a couple of days later. And it was just everywhere. There were flowers and cards and notes that said, "We are everywhere" with hearts, and love is everywhere. So the response to the community was encouraging and remains encouraging. I mean, I think we realize we have a problem, and we also have a lot of people committed to making the world better, making our city better.
Thanks. Rabbi Sandor, I'm going to go back to you. I'm glad I saw on Twitter and was thrilled for you about getting the vaccine. So tell us a little bit about that. Where you are in the eligibility, how things are going in North Carolina. And I guess one of the things that's happening right now, obviously in a lot of places, we're all waiting to get the vaccine. I know we have a big controversy here in my town about whether the schools should open until the teachers get vaccines. My husband's recently become a public school teacher, and he has underlying conditions, so we're waiting for him to get his vaccine. But it's exciting. And I wonder whether there are any like ethical dilemmas over who should get it when, and how you're thinking through some of that from a Jewish perspective.
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course I'm wondering, I can get the vaccine, which means who's not getting the vaccine. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how that happened. It's the power of centralized medicine. We have one centralized medical system in our country, and it's the VA. And so I wrote my primary care doctor and I said, "Do I qualify to get the vaccine?" Nurse wrote me back and said, "Yes, call this number to set up an appointment." I called, and that was it. And I'm not, the people, I'm a veteran.
Because you're a vet? Is that
I do have underlying conditions.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. But I don't know. I don't know what the hierarchy.
Please share your medical records on this.
Right. So like centralized medicine, they have my medical records. They can easily do the little triage or whatever, and they just said that I do. And so, universal healthcare, centralized medicine, which is I think one of the reasons why, Israel has been very successful, from what I understand, about how they have distributed the vaccine. We don't have that, and even when I have great private health insurance, but I love the VA system. Not perfect, but I've always had great healthcare through them. Sometimes things are a little slow, and as long as I'm not in a hurry. And even when I had a medical emergency, I still went to the VA and I still had proper care. And I think, and that's why. My dad's also a veteran, and him and his wife received the vaccine, but they are of that age group. And I'm not sure how he went about it. I just know he wrote me and showed me their little card.
I don't know if you're both getting questions from congregants about this, but I mean, is the basic, would you say that obviously the pikuach nefesh is the overlying Jewish value that, goes forth. The most important thing we can do is save lives, right? Is there any circumstance? I mean, I think it seems like if you can get one, you should get one. We all need to get them eventually. Everybody who gets one is going to help bring the virus down collectively. And whoever's making decisions about who gets in what order feels like you just got to get it as soon as you can get it, right? I don't know. Are there any Jewish teachings you can share about how you're thinking about it, or questions that are coming up in your communities?
I think pikuach nefesh is perfect. I think, it's the numbers have seemed like they are going down, and there has been more trust within the vaccine. But if we want to get back to where we can have, regular, normal lives again, whatever that means, because that will be different than it was before, the sooner that we are vaccinated and continue to wear masks, because even though I'm going to get the vaccine, I'm still going to wear a mask out in public. The more that we do that, the better off we'll be. And our government is finally leading by example by issuing mandates or issuing whatever they issue, saying, wear masking in public space. They're modeling masking, they're modeling getting the vaccine. Whether you agree with it or not, those are huge examples of what we need to do. There was a void in that, as far as I'm concerned, this past year. And states, I was listening something, whatever, where it felt like states had to defend for themselves to get, remember ventilators and, all the other stuff that's happened this past year. We all have a new vocabulary now, where if we had better universal health care or a centralized system or a government that was more focused, we'd be better off. Instead, our numbers are embarrassing. We're supposed to be the leader, the leaders, the smartest, or whatever we want to call of ourselves. And our numbers don't reflect that. And we are not doing the things that we should be doing. We weren't doing the things we should be doing to make this virus better.
Yeah, I heard a report that said something like 26, not 2,600, not 26 million, like 26 people in the developing world had been vaccinated. There's grotesque inequity in how this vaccine is being distributed. But that said, my mother, who is listening, who's 82, got a vaccine a week or so ago. My daughter, who's 26, got vaccinated a few weeks before my mom, because my daughter lives in Tel Aviv. Okay. Now, my daughter, it's grossly unfair that my 26-year-old daughter got vaccinated before my mother. And it's even more grossly unfair that my daughter got vaccinated before many, many people with serious underlying conditions in the third world. But my daughter, if my daughter had said, no, I don't want a vaccine, it wouldn't have gone to those folks. I mean, The Times ran a piece the other day that said, Jody, was essentially what you've said, which is if you're offered a vaccine, take the vaccine. So, my thought is, take the vaccine when you can get it, but also, make your voice heard and work for justice so that we can get more equitable distribution and redo the way we do healthcare.
Great. Anything else on the vaccine, or should I move on? I'll move on. Okay. Rabbi Sander, I mentioned in the intro that I just took a new job, and it's not just a new job for you, it's a new job for the Reconstructionist movement. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing, I don't know if you're moving from North Carolina or staying, but about, why you're deciding to make this move from the university setting to this new role, what you hope to do there. Tell us about what's going on in your life.
Yeah. So my role right now, which I'm still in this position, I'm the associate chaplain for Jewish life at Elon University and the Hillel Jewish educator. And, this COVID, with all of its craziness, has also offered some blessings. And one of those blessings has been this opportunity for this job. I found myself in a unique position probably after I wrote that the op-ed piece for the Forward. I don't remember the timeline, where I was getting a lot of requests to help our Jewish community understand what's going on, help our Jewish community talk about George Floyd, help our Jewish community talk about racism. And now I did have those skills before, and I did do those things before, but after George Floyd, like the amount of offerings to do that were just a lot. And then I even changed how I teach, because I wasn't interested anymore in just popping in and let me give you a lesson on racism or the history of racism or, Jewishness and whiteness. I wanted the workshops to be more innovative on Zoom. So I would tell communities, I said, I don't want to actively teach while your community passively listens. I'm going to ask them questions. I'm going to ask them to do things. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah. But then after a while, that wasn't enough. Like, I really wanted to be in a position to do more, because it is easy for me to come in, let me give you a talk, and then I leave. And I don't know what you do with that, and nothing changes. And so, in conversations with Reconstructing Judaism, who, I'm a student of RRC, or the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and these weren't strangers that I was talking to. And I said, look, you guys are on the forefront of racial justice issues. You don't have any people of color. You don't have any Black people in leadership positions. And what's interesting, because it is my movement, I thought I'd get some pushback. They're like, no, you're right. And it's embarrassing. and from that, and with the help of the Jewish Color Initiative run by Ilana Kaufman, we got money to support this position. And this is the direction that Jewish organizations are going. And if they aren't going, they need to be going this direction, because Judaism is more, Judaism, what I tell people, Judaism looks like America. So whatever, American Judaism, so whatever demographics you have in the American population, you're going to have in the same demographics in the Jewish population. And so your leadership needs to reflect what that diversity is. And so what I'm going to be doing is, because this is new, I get to chart my own path. I find myself, I told my wife, I said, I really think that I find myself in another position where there is no path. And so I'm realizing that doing positions like this must be a skill, because I keep getting in them. But I'm going to help our movement make policy to make our congregations more equitable, to help our congregations move towards anti-racism. I'm going to mentor students, which is a skill that I developed by working at a college. I get to help future rabbis, all future rabbis that come through RRC, but in particular provide mentorship for Jews of color. I mean, can you imagine like having no role model as you're going through school, and now you have one? Like that's pretty powerful. At least I hope it's a powerful thing. And then I get to work with a bunch of lay leaders who've been doing this work in the movement for a while, and it should be fun. And I'm also staying in North Carolina. I'm not interested right now in moving because of COVID. I live in a small town in North Carolina. It's safer to be, in some ways, it's safer to be in a small town. Moving to a big city during COVID is not a good idea. And my wife said no. So but I even said, you want to move to Philly? She's like, no. And she's from Philadelphia. So, and this was able to work out. If it doesn't work after a while, then the Reconstructionist movement and myself will have another conversation. But because of COVID, I could do this work remotely. And I do plan to, it's easy to travel from North Carolina to Philadelphia. And I will be making several trips back and forth. But I'll be staying in North Carolina.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about how the position grew and the way. I mean, I feel like I've heard from you before and other Black rabbis, Black Jewish leaders who really had that same experience of being like both so energized by the change in the conversation, but also really overwhelmed. And I think a lot of Jewish organizations, have talked a lot about all that they need to do to change and improve and grow, but creating a new job to say, we're going to create a leadership position that's going to have an actual portfolio. We're going to add budget for it and a role model is is really so important because it doesn't happen by just talking about it or having workshops or whatever. Dan, I wonder how this is playing out, this question of diversity within the Jewish community and Jews and race generally is playing out in a place like Boise, which is not exactly where we necessarily always think about it. Is it something that your congregation has been engaged with since George Floyd, and is it playing out in your community?
Yeah, and we, I mean, Boise is a pretty white place population-wise, but less so than when I got here, and growing more diverse. We are a home to a lot of refugees, and we have Black Jews, we have Latinx, Spanish-speaking Jews in my community, and we always have. And I think the more awareness we have, the more we listen, the more we learn.
So there's a question from the audience that relates to a question I was going to ask. So I'll combine it. Lee Wunsch says that she didn't feel it was clear enough from the intros, the journeys that you took to get where you are, and that very curious about the process of arriving where you are today, work-wise and geographic-wise. And I'll pick up just to add about the geography. I think one of the interesting things about the two of you is that you work and live in places that are not exactly what we think of as the centers of Jewish life nationally. And actually, I was really struck when people in the audience were posting in the chat where they are from, that I feel like we actually have quite a number of people here today who are also living in communities with not a huge, vibrant, active, necessarily Jewish community, and that it's kind of different to be a Jewish leader in a place that maybe has fewer Jews, fewer Jewish organizations. And so you can start with either your personal journey or the issue of place, but I'd love to hear both of you on that topic.
Yeah, so the personal journey piece, I'm not sure I understand, like, how I became a rabbi, how I wound up in North Carolina, or
who knows, right? Yeah, the process of arriving where you are today.
I think I'll just address the latter part, and if whoever wrote the question wants more detail, I'm sure I'm happy to answer. I went to rabbinical school in Philadelphia and had internships around the Philadelphia area. And I had an internship where I spent a summer in New York. And I quickly learned that I'm not comfortable there. And the other thing is, like, there are Jews all over the place. And, where I live, being a rabbi is really unique. It's like people want to know about Judaism, and Jews want to be engaged in Judaism. And I'm really committed to helping the Jews who are here have having thriving Jewish life here, where people often think of thriving. They think of like the coast, like Los Angeles and New York, but people are hungry for those spaces here. And I recently learned from a reporter I talked to that North Carolina is the state is number one on the list of people to move to. And the few years it wasn't one, it was two. And so there is where I live, I know I'm the only rabbi my neighbors have ever met, and I might be the only Jew. But there are really amazing, thriving Jewish communities in places like Charlotte and Durham and Chapel Hill and all those areas. And Dan knows, because you're from here, Dan, right? I know
my mom's in Chapel Hill.
So yeah, I hope she can. There's an amazing community in Chapel Hill called Kahila, and Reconstructionist Rabbi, there's thriving Jewish life, and I would love it if more attention was brought on Jews that don't live on the coast, the flyover states in the South. And there's rich history, and if we remember, the first Jews who immigrated to this country immigrated to in the South. Like the oldest Jewish community, I believe, is in Savannah, Georgia. So there's life in here, and also, just so you know, I am trying to slowly start a Jewish community in North Carolina.
How does one do that exactly?
Well, you apply for grants, and you tell them no, but seriously, I have but I like to joke, but I have I started this is like slowly becoming public, but I started a 501c. I created a 501c3. Well, I applied for a couple of grants, got them. Got a 501c3. The Jewish organization is called Kol HaPanim. because of COVID. It's going to be a virtual community, and then branch out hopefully when I find a physical location. And I'm starting this because I've had a lot of conversations with activists who live in the area, unaffiliated Jews that don't, for whatever variety of reason, feel like the Jewish spaces in there around them don't speak to them. Jews of color who are fed up with racism, and so we're going to see if we can do it. And I get to.
What does it mean exactly to start a Jewish community? What do you mean? So you start an organization. It's not a synagogue. It's not a activist group around a particular issue. It's defined as communal. That's
yeah. For me right now, it is like a place where we can come on Shabbat and pray and sing and be together. And for the activists out there who want to participate, it's like they can have their space where they can just be. and sing and participate, and then have the strength to go out and, fight another day. But also, like, because I do this morning minyan online every morning. If you don't know, I do a morning minyan online Mondays and Thursdays, and any day, I don't know where people are from. I've had people in Canada. This one morning, somebody was in Australia, and I was like, "What time is it there?" And also like in North Carolina or Chicago, So I have this like world minyan of people, and so I'm going to continue doing that because people are hungry for it. People want a space where they can be together, even if it means being on the screen.
Rabbi Dan, how did you end up in Boise, Idaho? And how have you've been there 26 years, obviously. So tell us a little bit about your path there, but then you've spent most of your rabbinate in a place with not a lot of Jews. So talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, so I grew up in places where there were a lot of Jews in Philly and then just outside of Washington, D.C. But all the places where I've been as a rabbi, I was 4 years in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. I was then 2 years in Omaha, and since then I've been here. So I've kind of been drawn to smaller communities. Part of it is the outdoor access. I laugh because, when I went from Omaha to Boise, people in Omaha said, "There are Jews in Boise?" I said, they say that about you in New York, even though there is a big and significant Jewish community in Omaha. But it's been my calling is to be in smaller Jewish communities because at some point you mentioned bigger and more vibrant, and I want to distinguish between big and vibrant because the two are really different. Our Jewish community is not big, at least by East Coast standards. I mean, we're the biggest community in Idaho. We're the biggest community between Salt Lake City and Portland, which is a big ton of geographic area, but we're clearly not big by major metropolitan area Jewish standards where most Jews live, but we're really vibrant. And one of the things that drew me is because in communities like ours, there's a kind of pioneer do-it-yourself spirit. In bigger Jewish communities, you can leave things to Jewish professionals. Here, if you leave them to Jewish professionals, they're mostly not going to get done. So people have to claim their Jewish identity. You can't take it for granted. If you want to live it, you have to actively contribute to it. I like the fact that, when I got here, we were the only synagogue in town. Chabad has come in about, 15 years ago. But we're still a big tent. We're Reform, we're conservative, we're Reconstructionist. And I like the fact that in smaller communities, Jews have to get along with one another. You can't everybody be off in their silo, and that was appealing to me from the start as a rabbi. I'm not a person who feels primarily bound by movement ties. I mean, I'm a Reform rabbi. I went to HUC. I'm a third generation Reform rabbi, but really, I see myself as Jewish and not Reform Jewish. That the noun means a lot more than the adjective. I think it's a lot easier to make change in smaller communities. It's a lot easier to turn a kayak, you know, as a kayaker. It's a lot easier to turn a kayak than it is to turn a battleship or an aircraft carrier. So I think we have access to possibilities of change. You know, it's still hard. People don't always like change, but I think we can experiment in ways that older, bigger, more established Jewish institutions can't. So those are all the things that I like about being in a small community that's drawn me. Again, I take a lot of nourishment from the natural world around me. You know, I do want to, the one thing that I struggle with and that I would like to see more on the national Jewish agenda for communities like my own, for kids that grow up in Jewish communities where they may be the only Jew or only a few Jews in their school, Jewish camp is incredibly important. I'm an ardent advocate for Jewish camp. I've been at Camp Kalsman, which is the URJ camp for the region, since its opening. And, you know, I think the national Jewish community, I would love to see an effort, you know, kind of akin to Birthright, to send Jews to camp, especially Jews who live in communities. You know, if you're in a big community and camp is a struggle financially, you go to Jewish Federation. Well, we don't have a Jewish Federation. So, you know, I would love to see something get on the map to get more Jewish kids to camp, because when you're from a small Jewish community, the opportunity to live in that kind of large Jewish environment, you know, where everybody around you is Jewish, is incredibly precious. And it's financially a struggle for a lot of people.
Yes, I am a big advocate of Jewish camp myself, and wrote about it a lot last year, and just asked someone on my staff to do a story about what's going on with Jewish camp this summer. Will they open, or how are they going to open? And I think, you know, there was a lot of talk about the financial challenges that COVID was going to present to them. So I'm very eager to find out. We sent our check-in for my son, but we'll see what happens. I want to get back to something both of you have alluded to, and Rabbi Dan, you just were talking about a little bit about the what happened in 2020, where we all were pressed by urgent circumstances and very quickly to kind of adapt and innovative and change how we do things in our organizational lives, in our Jewish lives, in our individual personal lives, in our family lives, et cetera. And I'm really interested. I've been thinking a lot as we've come into 2021 and as the vaccine is starting to roll out, like to think about what lessons we really learned from that experience. And what things you're either personally, professionally, communally kind of trying to hold on to, you think you'll want to take with you back into whatever the new normal turns out to be. I think Sandra said earlier, it's not going to be the same normal, right? So what are you holding on to? What were the silver linings for you that you think taught you something about better ways to operate, better ways to live, better ways to communicate that you want to make sure not to go back to normal about? Either one of you can go first.
You go.
Okay. There's a whole lot. My short list. You know, one, I think we're never going to go back to having no. We're going to stream stuff a lot more than we did before. I mean, seeing the people's parents, family, friends, people who used to be part of our community and moved and have been back because of Zoom. We don't want that to go away. You know, the ability to connect across the miles has been incredibly valuable. Jewish educational opportunities. I mean, it's extraordinary out there. My congregants and myself, you can get incredible highest level Jewish learning pretty much any hour of the day. Because of what we're learning through Zoom, through this pandemic. Collaboration. You know, when I need time off, you know, I can't lead services this week, you know, I'm connecting my folks to places and to sending them, you know, check out this congregation, check out this place. You know, I'm working with another community in a size, you know, similar to us, to kind of share speakers, share adult learning. I mean, the opportunity for collaboration is something we should have noted long before, but that we need to carry with us. And last, and maybe most important, I am learning that everything liturgically needs to be shorter. Nobody ever needs to hear a 25-minute sermon again, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with everything that Dan said, and I want to give like a couple of examples. One, I think that communities that try to take their physical spaces and then move them on the screen and lead services the same way quickly found out that that was not going to work. Communities that adapted to to Zoom and using all of the benefits of Zoom are creating amazing religious opportunities online. The other thing I would say is that, so I'm a rabbi on a college campus, and this is the first opportunity for many young people to experience Judaism outside of wherever they're used to experiencing. And that means a lot of conversations is like, they go like this: that's not Jewish. Or what is that? Or where do these extra prayers come from in the prayer book? And it's an opportunity for wonderful conversations and many challenges around high holidays. So I'm pluralistic. They wanted a pluralistic rabbi, and that means taking all the voices and trying to find a middle ground of an offering and pleasing everybody and pleasing nobody. COVID freed us up from that. And with our student leaders and students, I said, we are going to make history here. We are showing that it's more important for us to celebrate than not. So we're going to create something together that's different, and it's holy, and it's going to be fun. And they were up to the challenge, and our team agrees it was the best holidays we ever had. We had more student participation, we had more student leaders, we had more students volunteer for stuff. When I would call students and say, like, I had one of our students of color, several of our students of color, but one in particular, a Black Jewish student who's really not that engaged with Hillel, but I have a relationship with her. And I wrote her and I said, I want to get this offering. And it was a poem about Black Lives Matter. And I called her up and I said, like, and she's an activist too, and she led a Black Lives Matter march on campus. And I said, I would really love for you to read this. If you don't, I totally understand. And let me know what you want to do. And she read it. She's like, of course I'm going to read it. So her voice was in there. And I had one song leader, I asked him to sing a particular prayer. And after a while, I said, Rabbi, I can't do it. And I said, okay, fine. He's like, well, can you just do it? I said, I can. I said, I would rather find something that fits the theme of this prayer and have your voice. So what do you got? and that was like a few minutes before the service, or maybe an hour before the service. And we went back and forth, and I said, give me some secular songs, because I can do Imagine by John Lennon. Perfect. So I rewrote my whole Kavanah. Nobody else knew but him and I. And we just did the service, and it was, I'm sure that my team will continue that once I'm gone, but it was, even our students agreed, it was the best service, considering, I mean, yes, we want to be in person, but it allowed us to finally create a service that was not beholden to anybody else's tradition and create an Elon University service. And so I hope that continues, because the entire staff enjoyed it. And one more thing I forgot I wanted to say is that because of COVID, we now have parents come to our services, and the students don't mind. It'll be like a mom might be there lighting candles on a different box than her daughter. We had one family, when it was warm, they had this big screen television in some kind of backyard, and they could see their son, the song leader, and they were like singing with him. Like, these are experiences you just can't have without COVID. I'm not saying that I want to spend my entire life on a screen as a rabbi, but there is so much awesomeness that has happened because of COVID when it comes to religious stuff.
I mean, I think to me, what my takeaway from what you just said is it's really not about the screen at all. It's really about this core of like innovation and this idea of, and my favorite, I love to think about, you know, the key to innovation is to distinguish between traditions and habits, which is such a Jewish framework, right? So the tradition is like the essence, as you were saying. What's the theme? What can you do on this theme? What's the new habit you can create for us? The new minhag or whatever, and that we need to be pressing ourselves to find the innovations and the new habits that actually work for whatever circumstance we're in, and not to just presume that the way we've been doing it, which we know is not working in so many cases because we see whether it's affiliations falling off or whatever, well, this is the way it is. This is, you know, it's like, so it's just a core principle of innovation. We are almost out of time. So I'm going to give each of you a minute to talk about, and I'll have Dan go first because then Dan's going to take us out with a song. So I want some expectation or hope or prediction for 2021, a short one, something you're really looking forward to, whether it's from the Biden administration, whether it's a personal milestone, whatever, but something about what a hope or expectation or prediction. And then Rabbi Dan's going to take us out with a song related to Tu B'Shvat, I think, right?
Yes.
Great.
So if I had to choose one verse from Tanakh that is my favorite, it is a passage from Job where God says, "Let the earth teach you Torah." I believe we learn from our environment, but to learn from it, we have to respect it and treat it kindly. And my hope and my expectation for 2021 is that we are going to get serious about climate change. We're seeing this out of the bat from the current administration, and I think and I hope that the Jewish world will get behind this 150%. You know, there's a lot that divides us in the Jewish world, but surely we can all get together to make our planet livable for our grandchildren and those to follow.
Hey, Rabbi Lawson?
So, you know, this week's Torah portion, you know, I mentioned earlier, we find ourselves at the edge of the sea. And we learned last week that Avadim Ayinu b'Mitzrayim, like we were slaves. That word Mitzrayim, that we learned that we were slaves. And I often like to translate Mitzrayim, not as Egypt, but as a reminder that Mitzrayim is the narrow place, the place of constriction, the place of pain. And, you know, with divine help, we moved out of this place of constriction and pain. And later in the Torah portion, when we lose faith a little bit and complain about lack of food and water, God gives us food and water, but also gives us the gift of Shabbat. And it reminds us that if we find ourselves in this place, if we find ourselves in Mitzrayim, the place of narrowness, the place of pain, or we are having a hard time, that we're given this gift of Shabbat, and the opportunity of rest can help us see things a little bit clearer, and help us move through the narrow place and the place of pain. And so that's what I believe that is going to happen in 2021. We are moving through the narrowness into something awesome.
And you're right, son.
That's on. Yes. We're going to close. We're going to let Rabbi Dan take us out with some music, but I just want to...
Oh my God. I have one of those. I want to
thank our team, Lisa Lepson, Dina Cooperman, Gabby Brooks, who put this program together. Thank you all for supporting and reading the foreword. You will get in your email along with the video an offer to join us as subscribers on a discount, and I hope you'll take us up on that. I don't know if it's too early to say Shabbat Shalom on a Wednesday, but happy Tu B'Shvat. May you have a meaningful holiday. And Rabbi Dan.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. This is a song for Tu B'Shvat. It's called Hashkedia, which is the almond tree. And it's about the almond trees, which are the first to blossom. And I hope that we see the blossoming of lots of beautiful things in this coming year. Shemesh Basorah, Tzipori Mirosh Gogag, Mivasro Ebo Hafag, Tu B'Shvat Igia, Chag Ilanot, Tu B'Shvat Igia, Chag Ilanot. Happy Tu B'Shvat, everybody.
Thank you, Yasher Koch.
Thank you so much. This is always awesome. Thank you.
Great to have you both.
A pleasure.